Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. How are you guys? Um, yes, I am in Qatar, and I was panicking a little bit, just for a little bit, because let me just get everything sorted. Because we have a lot of censorship here, and right now with the blockade and everything is quite intense. So let me make sure that I have everyone here, and if you guys can type on the chat that you can hear me and see me, that would be great. Um,
We can hear and see you. Great.
Everything great? Awesome, amazing. I cannot see myself, so I'm a little bit freaked out. Normally I can see me. Anyway, yes, I am in Qatar. Qatar is in the Middle East, and like many of you guys, we are all struggling with the whole COVID-19 and everything that is around it. So I had a little bit of an issue with making sure that that my everything was of my perception and everything. So yeah, I'm here. I'm gonna start sharing with you. I prepare something. So, okay, so you guys, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant, awesome, fantastic. So, first of all, I am so happy that I was able to join this amazing project. But also, I'm really happy with everything that I heard from Michelle, because the reality is that I resonate deeply with everything, which is why we're working together. We're kind of like a collective of like-minded people. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is called a little very, very powerful therapy. It's around 10 years old, and it's called BWRT, Brain Work Recursive Therapy. And how I use it in my practice to help my clients make peace with their minds. So my presentation today is called Making Peace with Our Minds, Shifting Our Perceptions with BWRT and Self-Care. We're going to talk a little bit about what is BWRT, how the brain works, perceptions, and our needs, how does BWRT works directly on the brain, and then how do we use self-care to shift the way we see the world, because ultimately it's not just about how we it's not only about how we are feeling the world, but how we are perceiving it. And I think that that's something that is very, very interesting, that we kind of like become aware of. Here, there we go. Fantastic. Okay, so first of all, this is me. I am Anahi. And like Michelle was saying, I am an empowerment coach. I do believe that everyone deserves to be and feel at their very best, regardless of where you are in your life, in your journey, in your size, in your body, in your relational status, and everything. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is because I myself have gone through a whole roller coaster of things. I am a Hashimoto's warrior. I struggle with depression, anorexia. I have arthritis. I have gone through several challenges, and I have discovered that ultimately it's not about what we face, or even the different things that we can be experiencing, but about how do we feel through them. Do we integrate them, or do they become part of our narrative in a very negative way, which is what Michelle said about journaling. I was like, yay, journaling, amazing way to get your narrative in your hands. So I do many things. I am a trained chef, and my career started mostly in nutrition. However, I quickly realized that it was not just what we eat, but everything that nourishes, and that includes our movement, our friendships, what we consume in social media, etc., that made a huge impact in the way we experience the world, in the way we live. And that kind of like slowly got me into this position where I am today, where yes, I do follow a very specific dietary style, and I do like to continue that way with my clients. But ultimately, I know that they are going to get the best, not for what they eat, but also how they think about themselves, how they show up in the world for themselves first, and then for the collective. I am a speaker. I use self-care as the anchor and as a key element to empower my clients and everyone that I come to contact with on their journey. And ultimately, I believe that the best way to be here and to show up is to be very, very open-hearted, and to be honest and authentic, because that's the best way to actually tackle into the best we have in our brains. So let's talk a little bit about resiliency, perception, and the brain. And the brain is one of my favorite topics to discuss. I actually love data and love science. And I love the way when we understand how our brain works from a very rustic way, we can actually start shifting it so that it can serve us better. This is a model called the Trion brain, Trion tree. So it's a division of the brain in three areas, according with when was it developed in our evolutionary journey, but also when does it come, let's say that come live as we are living. And in this model, which is, please know that if you're a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, do not hold me accountable because it is not an anatomically correct model. It's just an explanation of how the different areas of the brain work for ourselves. So this model divides the brain in three areas. The first one is the primitive brain, if you can see it here in red. It's our brain stem. It's also called reptilian complex. And it's basically the part of the brain that is meant to keep us alive. It keeps us in and out of fight or flight mode. It's the one that controls our temperature, our hormones, our breathing, our swallowing, things that we are not even paying attention to. The thing is that this part of the brain, which is the part that is developed the earliest, is the part of the brain that is fully on when babies are born, also knows only two emotions. One is fear and one is love. And when we talk about fear in this context, we're not talking about, ooh, the boogeyman. We're talking about a fear that is very primal, is I am dying. And then when we talk about love, we're not talking about cuddly love that is going to buy me flowers. We're talking about I am surviving. So it's a very simple shift there. Then we have our mammalian brain. And our mammalian brain, what it does, it has the part of the link to emotionality, belonging. It begins to instill a sense of, I believe I am part of this collective. I am part of this community, of this tribe. And it also starts to establish some stories that we're telling ourselves regarding where do we place ourselves in our little tribe. And then finally, we have our prefrontal cortex, which is the part here that is the last to come fully to development. It actually, scientists say that it could finish its development between 25 and 28 years. And is the storyteller, is the consciousness, is the one that knows that it knows. So the difference between the reptilian, mammalian, and prefrontal cortex is that we humans are the only ones that have a sophisticated prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that gives us conscious, that tells us, I know that I'm feeling this. I know that I am sensing that. Whilst other animals just know the feeling. So a dog might be feeling a lot of love and happiness for their masters, but it's not going to be able to detach from it. The prefrontal cortex allows us to detach. And one of the amazing tools to do that precisely is what Michelle was saying, is meditation, is journaling. Is when I take hold of the story and I'm like, oh, I am not what I feel. I'm actually me holding a feeling or holding a story. And why am I speaking about the brain in this talk, basically? It's because the brain gives us stories. A lot of what we believe and a lot of what we think we know or what we think we want to know is not necessarily about what is happening, but about what we're telling ourselves about what is happening. A big example is right now with everything that is happening with COVID-19. Many of us have allowed to remain detached from the pandemic crisis, understanding that it's huge and that it is bigger than us, but without drowning in the stories. Being able to say, oh, the story that I'm telling myself is that this is putting me on threat or whatever. And so that by doing this, what we do is that we engage with different parts of the brain. Instead of following for this reptilian complex, this very primitive, we're dying part, we allow ourselves to create space between the limitations, which are many, and ourselves. And it is within that space that we start to have some freedom. Now, why is this so important? Because when we shift to Maslow's pyramid of needs, and this is a very known concept in psychology, we have different needs that can be met at different times, depending on where we are in our journeys. What's happening here is that many of these elements, despite the fact that some of them are very, very present, can be perceptional. So at the bottom, we have our physiological needs met, then we have our safety needs, then our belonging and love needs, our esteem needs, and finally our self-actualization needs. And these needs can be very, very real, as in maybe I am living in the streets, so my needs, my basic needs are not met, therefore I cannot transcend. Or maybe I am actually very comfortable. I live in a beautiful house. I have food every day. I have everything I need to survive is met. I have people that love me. I have a job, and everything is covered. However, in a perceptional aspect, I cannot move forward. So one of the things that Maslow always said is that when we talk about the pyramid of need, it's not just what we lack, and here most of these are deficiency needs, but what we understand that we lack. Many of us have most of these needs met. However, we are in a constant state of survivalism. We are still struggling to understand that we are safe, that we belong, that we are okay. Especially those people that have been engaging in strict dietary issues can be stuck there for a long time. Even when you have an abundance of food in front of you, you don't allow yourself to understand that the food is there and then it's abundant and it's ready for you to just take advantage of that. So this is when we enter the perception of the need in our human existence. And this is really important because many times we are going through our life, we are going through this journey from a position of lacking that is so ingrained in ourselves, that is so triggered in our self-worth and in our basic emotionality, that even when everything is going well, we are here. We are in a constant state of survival. We cannot move up. A lot of my clients see that when we start working together, they are very comfortable. When we look at their needs, they're all met. They have beautiful homes. They have loving families. They are happy, yet in the not allowing themselves to feel worthy of it, they remain here. They remain in a surviving mode that does not allow them to disengage from that primitive brain so that they can become less reactive and move forward to this prefrontal cortex where they can make decisions based on love, understanding, compassion, and growth. This is why, even though many of us in today's world have a lot of our needs covered and we're very, very comfortable, we are in a constant state of stress. Now, don't get me wrong, we are living in one of the biggest worldwide pandemics that we have ever experienced. This is something unprecedented, and there will be a before and after COVID-19. We all know that. However, even with that, many of us have a lot of things to be grateful for, yet we cannot move past it because our brain is so used to the reactivity, to the stress, to the I'm dying, I'm constantly dying, that we cannot move up. And it's really interesting. Whenever I explain this in workshops, I always tell the people, the participants, that when you look at the monks, when you look at the people in either India or Tibet or different areas where they have been practicing meditation and a lot of detachment culture, they most of the time feel here in this transcending part. They're joyfully working for the greater good in the whatever way they are doing that, even though many times these part, the survival needs, are unmet. Many of them don't own homes, they don't have money, they don't even understand the concept of buying things. However, they have allowed their minds to move up. This is why perception is so important, because ultimately what happens with many people, and I always put the example of people like Amy Winehouse or even Britney Spears, these people that come into stardom and into a lot of wealth very fast, and then they end up going through either a horrendous self-destructive period or ultimately suicide. Why? Because it doesn't matter how much we have, it matters whether we perceive it or not. So it is not about what we physically, tangibly can hold. It's about whether we can see it as ours and we can believe it belongs to us. Whether we can believe that we are worthy of them. So for many of us right now, it's a really important shift towards understanding that in this pandemic, when there's so much lacking in the world, not only are we blessed, but also if we go a little bit further, we can we can actually move to a thriving state where we are content and satisfied and our needs are met comfortably. And then maybe shift a little bit more, just a little bit more our perception, so we can start living from a place of wholeness, understanding that everything that we have, we are worthy of. Now, what is BWRT? So BWRT is a therapy called brain work recursive therapy. Like I mentioned, it was created by Terence Walls in the UK in 2011. So it's quite recently, even though he had started his studies of this for a long time. So Terence basically has been studying the brain and how the brain works in many different ways in his practice. He's a psychologist, and he wanted to understand how come some people react so viscerally to certain events and others don't? What was happening in the brain that makes some people get hooked on drugs or get addictions and others don't do that? So he basically he started first with something very similar to NLP and hypnotherapy. And then the therapy began to evolve. And he began to notice that there was a way that we could trick the brain so that we can shift the brain. Now, this is not about wiping your brain or deleting your memories. That's not at all what it does. What it does is that it shifts the patterns and the way that the idea and the energy is moving in the brain. And it has been proven. It has been used a lot, especially when it comes to things that are traumatic and in the pre-verbal years. So what it does is that it does not change the memory, it changes your reaction and your perception of the memory. So that instead of triggering your reptilian brain back into a state of victimhood and powerlessness, you can reshape the story and the narrative in your brain and shift forward so that it is your prefrontal cortex in control. In this way, you can completely transform the way you react to very, very strong situations. It is really, really amazing to see this play with phobias, fears, and really, really hardcore addictions, because you're basically taking the brain and saying, okay, so the way you work is this, now I want you to work this way. And I will show you guys in a minute. So as I said, this is how it works. It basically just shifts the neural pathways. So it's the kind of like the highways in our brain, so that when we are facing a stimuli, instead of behaving the same way that we have always behaved, we begin to behave in new ways that are much more in accordance with our goals and our vision for ourselves. So imagine that your brain is like a beautiful computer. And in the computer, when you press enter, there's a command, and that command is jump down, jump down, jump down. The same thing happened with our brain in the real world. It's looking for patterns, and whenever it detects a pattern that feels a little bit familiar, it automatically has a reaction. If I see this, then I react with this way. What we do with BWRT is that we shift. Say, when I see this, I'm no longer going to react this way, I'm going to react a new way. And by doing this, what I'm doing is that I am still preserving my memory, I am still preserving my integrity of my brain and my knowledge, but I am taking ownership of how am I going to react to the stimuli? How am I going to behave? And by doing this several times, thanks to the therapy, you create a new neural pathway, so that instead, whenever I press enter, instead of doing a command that tells me to go down, I go sideways, for example. In this way, one of the amazing things that is one of the reasons why I love this therapy so much is that it begins to shift also the way your brain, your stomach, your cells behave, because it begins to control a bit more how much hormones are being pumped into your body, how much cortisol are you producing. It begins to shift the way your body handles stress, and through this, your whole physiognomy starts to change. It's actually very, very powerful. So we don't shift the memory, we shift the behavior, we shift the reaction to the memory. One of the most powerful case studies that they have been done was in South Africa with very, very underprivileged communities, where they will take women who have been victims of sexual violence and abuse, and they started to coach them with BWRT to see if they could diminish their reaction to men, sex, and different things, without having to rob them from all that they have experienced, because it is not fair to just wipe their brains. And it is unreal when you see the videos, and these women are slowly and steadily shifting their reaction and completely transforming the way that they behave. And from an hour interaction, they could start completely falling apart, and slowly they can just talk differently. And at the end, they are not crying. And the same thing will happen a couple more times. And by the end of the of the program, these women will feel totally empowered within themselves to react in a very assertive way to whatever was happening. For me, myself, the biggest shift was with a memory that I had about my dad's death. And it was a memory that I had in my head it was not real, but it's something I construct that I created. And after doing one session, my reaction to that memory was gone. In the session, I started sobbing and slowly started coming down. And at the end of it, I could not fire a response back, which is a great way to kind of like take ownership of your life. So basically what we do with this therapy is that we create new pathways in your brain. We create new connections in your brain about how it's going to respond to different stimuli. And with this, you start to create a new you that feels much more confident, that feels much more anchored in worthiness, and that is much more empowered and powerful, because you're not reacting from a place of fear from the back of your brain. You're actually moving forward to your prefrontal cortex, where you can separate from the story and be like, okay, so the story that I'm creating about this memory, or the story that I'm creating about this stimuli is X, Y, Z, and that makes me react this way. But now I want to shift my reaction. Okay, so how am I going to react now? So for example, if you are a person that is very nervous about money, which is a huge issue for many of us, right? And whenever you think about spending money, you begin to feel very anxious. We work on that core memory, not to delete it, because there's a reason why it's there. It has served you for a long time, but so that your response to it is much more calm and loving, and you can be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling triggered about money. Okay, I wonder what could I do to change that? And maybe the new pathway is gonna be like, whenever I have to face the fact of that I'm spending money, I'm gonna tell myself that I'm safe and that there's abundance for me always. And so through this repetition, and there's a lot of work that is done whilst you are not even paying attention, what happens is that your brain shifts, and new pathways are a new you. Because the more we rewire our brain, new behaviors start to come up. And the more new behaviors we have, the more different we become, right? So let me show you a little bit how it happened. This is basically what it works, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. But basically, this what it tells you is that we receive data, and even before we are fully aware of it, our brain has already established how is it going to behave. Even before you know that you know, your brain knows. So you receive the data. Let's say that you're walking in an alley and you see a shade that it could be a man or it could be a threat. So the data is received here, and your brain goes, wait, have I found something like that before? If the answer is yes, automatically your brain is going to say, well, I found this before and I behave this way, and that kept me safe. Therefore, this is what I'm going to do. If the answer is no, then your brain is going to be like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay. Have I found anything in my brain? Is there anything around there that I can get to inform me of how am I going to react? And then that's when we start to create stories. Now, let's say that again, when you're walking on an alley and you see a shade and you're just like, oh, I don't know what's that, and you're getting triggered, and your brain says, last time we were on an alley, you were robbed. You are going to start automatically a state of panic and alert, and that can drain you. And at the end of the day, it may or may not be something that is actually worth your full on attention and energy. So with BWRT, what we do is that instead of interrupting the memory itself, and because we cannot change your perception of everything, what we do is that we work here. We work with what happens between the moment that your brain gets the data and the awareness. We shift this loop so that when you say, have I found something like that? If the answer is yes, you automatically says yes, and I behave empowered. And if the answer is no, you say no, but I can shift it this way. So that basically you're taking control of the response that your brain gives to a stimuli even before you consciously, your prefrontal cortex, knows what's going on. It's pretty magical in reality. Well, it's not magical, it's actually very scientific, but you know what I mean. Now, why do I combine this very technical work with self-care? Because basically, like I was saying, let me just go back. Stop sharing. Okay, so you can see me again for a little bit. Basically, because one of the reasons why we are not allowing ourselves to shift up in that pyramid is our perception of ourselves. We are deprived in many ways. Many of us are working more than we need to, and we're constantly telling ourselves, and still I'm not good enough. So you are working either in your passion or for your family, You are draining yourself with other stuff. You are getting a lot of input from social media informing you that you might not be doing enough. And then at the end of the day, what's happening is that your reptilian brain, your fight or flight mode, is constantly on. If you have heard about adrenal fatigue, if you have heard about burnout syndrome, this is a consequence of a whole generation of people that, or actually a couple of generations of people that are drowning in unworthiness. And when we are feeling constantly unworthy, what happens is that we are very skimped with our nourishment. So we do not prioritize the good food that we need. We do not prioritize our rest. We do not prioritize our movement. We do not prioritize with those things that matter and that could create a huge shift in ourself, in our perception of our life. Because ultimately, we will not always be able to transform our life, unfortunately. What we can transform is the way we see this life. So self-care is one of the ways that we can actually do that. And I'm back here. Because because the actions, the decisions and commitments that we're making daily to take care of our body, our mind, our relationships, our resources, when we choose this from a place of self-awareness, when we choose this from a place of abundance to ourselves, when we choose this from a place of worthiness, unconditional, abundant, and loving, then we begin to go up in the pyramid. We stop feeling that we are surviving only, oh my God, oh, I need to go this and do that. And we're going to bring ease to ourselves. Not to mention that we stop producing so much cortisol and other hormones, which allows our brains to actually chill and recover. We cultivate a mindset of unconditional self-worth when we allow ourselves to feel that we are worthy of nourishment. Now, I know that this is easier said than done, which is why it's a daily practice, and which is why things like Michelle was saying, like meditation, like journaling, holding that story can be a great way to shift your perception and start to see yourself as a baby, as a lovely baby that is there and that is worthy because it exists. It doesn't need to do anything. It just shows up and it's already worthy, which is our core essence. And through this, not only can we face obstacles better, but also we can stop thinking that we need to just barely survive. And we start to say, no, but I deserve more. I deserve to thrive. I deserve to feel anchored in ease and calmness, even when facing a pandemic event like we are doing right now. I deserve to be happy because I'm alive, not because I finished all my issues, all the things that I had pending at work, not because I have a lot of money in the bank, not because my business is doing well, not because my children are perfect, but because I exist. Because ultimately, worthiness is like our blood type. I can drain you dry, but your blood type will always remain the same. I will still have to put the same one. It never changes. From the moment that you are born to the moment that you die, your worthiness is infinite and abundant, but we don't perceive it that way. And using tools like BWRT to transform the way your brain reacts to things, but also using something much more simple like self-care daily, very, very intentionally, you can begin to see yourself as worthy of more. You can begin to bring that ease and that space for you to expand, especially when facing obstacles. I mean, right now, it's one of those moments where if you don't start investing in yourself abundantly, lovingly, passionately, unapologetically, and fiercely, you're going to hit burnout. We are all going to hit burnout. I always say to my clients, in situations where you have to take more from yourself, you have to give more to yourself. And to me, it's a 2-to-1. So if I know that I have to give 1 to the world, 1 extra, I have to give 2 to me. And those proportions are going to depend on the person and the stage that they are in their life. And of course, this is something very, very individual. But it is a call to remind ourselves that the world might be falling to pieces or not. It does not matter, except if the story that we're telling ourselves is that we will not survive. That is a huge shift. Is when you step back for a moment and you create enough space between what's happening in you to say, okay, there's a lot of hard thing happening. and I'm safe and I belong to me and I will go through it and I will overcome it. Because ultimately, we will or we won't is completely out of our hands. The only thing that is in our hands is how are we going to face it. Especially when a lot of the decisions are being taken from our hands and put into our governments, right? So every step that we're taking that is supporting our wellness is going to impact our resiliency. And from then it's going to make us feel much more worthy and much more at peace. And that is going to allow us, again, to move up. So if I can take a moment a day, just a moment, to acknowledge that all my basic needs are met, if I can then move one step higher and say, not only are all my needs met, but I have a lot of abundance. I'm comfortable. I'm not at risk. I'm actually quite okay. And then you start to move upward and say, not only are my needs met and I'm actually surrounded with quite a bit of abundance, but I deserve it. I am whole. I am worthy. Then you can move to this final step when you are joyfully working for the greater good. Because the reality is that as long as we are feeling deprived and as long as we are here, we are not going to be able to impact the world. And I truly believe that all of us have a very, very big purpose that goes beyond waking up, working, making money, spending money, going to bed. So this is why, to me, it's so important that we start to shift our perception, because the more we become conscious of the different ways in which we are keeping ourselves drained and undernourished here, not in our reality, the more we can start to climb up until we're here. And we can start to give the universe, the world, from a place of abundance. We can, as those of us that are parents, can show up as parents that are loving and that are shifting the paradigms of parenthood and childhood in our children. We can start impacting them positively because we are no longer deprived. So instead of coming as a mom and being like, oh my God, you're driving me crazy, you are like, oh, I'm in control, I'm okay, I can face this. Then those of us that are healers, that are serving, that are working for others, you can really show up. You are not showing up from a place of, I really hope that they like me. I really hope that they see that I'm really good. You are just like, oh, I'm showing up with all I have because I have abundance. And this abundance is totally internal. It has nothing to do with your reality, but with how you're perceiving that reality. And then those of us that are actually wanting to shift the world, and I think that if you are here today, you are definitely among our team, you can then say, okay, so what reality do I want to create? What new world am I ready to birth with other similar people? And we are never going to get there if we are constantly counting calories, feeling that Maria next door is better than me, measuring my thighs or my weight, and telling myself that I'm not doing enough, that I'm not good enough. We are never going to make it there. If we do, we are going to make it from a very posture, and we are never going to stay there for long. So, because there's nothing better than having some actionable items, I'm going to leave you guys with two really small, really short routines that I always teach my clients that could help in shifting our perception. Because at the end of the day, for you to perceive life's goodness, you have to be aware of it. You have to be awake for it. And that's a little bit difficult when all we are hearing all the time is the number of people that are getting infected, the number of people that is dying, the number of money, the la, 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 la. So let's just take ownership of our life, starting with these two routines. The first one is a start of the day routine. And I actually love this because it takes you literally 3 minutes. It's you open your eyes. For those of you that pray, you may do a little prayer, or those, if you have to run to the toilet, you run to the toilet and come back. And then you ask yourself, you think of something to let go of today. So maybe, and it could be a phrase or it could be a word. So one thing that I'm going to let go of today is going to be, and you say it, one thing that I'm grateful for today. And you have to be specific. A lot of data and research shows that when it comes to gratefulness, when it comes to gratitude, it's not just saying, oh, I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my husband, I'm grateful, but it's like very specific. The more specific, the better, because that's when you actually shift to how you are telling the narrative. So instead of saying, I'm grateful that I'm alive, which is awesome, you can say something like, I'm I'm grateful that I'm alive today, April, whatever, and that I get to go to the groceries today, that I have money in the bank, and that I'm going to buy my favorite bread so that I can make a delicious breakfast for my children and for me to enjoy as we are watching cartoons together. I don't know. Make it very, very specific. For example, one example that I always do is that many parents say something like, I'm grateful for my children who are very healthy, but I will go a little bit deeper. So for example, for me, it will be something like, I'm grateful for the little breath that Mikey just took as I put him to sleep. And it was one of those, because it reminds me of his baby years. It's something super specific, and it's something that I can really like savor. And then finally, one thing to focus on today. And why do we want that? We want that because we want to know exactly how is it that I'm going to be spending my energy? Where is it that I'm going to put my focus? And remember what I said at the beginning. Our brains are machines, are like computers that are trying to show us the way so that we can achieve our next level, our goal, remain alive. So if my focus for today is, for example, love or space or expansiveness, completion, rest, then your brain is going to be looking for ways to prove you right and to help you in that. So that's how I start my day every day. And then the last is the end of the day routine. And if you have children or if you have a spouse or family around you, this is a great way to end the day together. And it's called the rose, rose, thorn, bud exercise. So basically you start with a rose. So a rose is something that moved me towards a goal or moved me towards something that I wanted to accomplish on the day. Then the second rose is about something that I appreciate from another person. So you could do something like, my first rose goes to getting all the equipment that I needed so that I could start working on that project that is being really nagging me these days, so that I will be doing that tomorrow. So that's my first rose. My second rose is going to be being very grateful to the person at the shop that helped me get all my equipment fast so that I could come back home safely. Then you move to a thorn, and a thorn is something that is a problem, an issue, that the moment that you say it, you leave it there. So you're not going to go back to the same thorn over and over. You basically say, it pinned, it poke, and I let it go, okay? So the thorn could be something like, traffic was really bad. I really don't like driving these days. Or it could be something a little bit bigger, like I'm realizing that I need to let go of this task because it's not helping me move towards my goals, and that is challenging right now. And then finally, you have the but. And the but to me are the most special ones, because it's when you start to view your life in the future and you say, so what is something that I'm looking forward to? What is one thing that I want to grow? And it might be growing quietly, like plants, or it might be growing really loudly. And what is one thing that I'm really excited about? Especially if you're sharing this with your family, this could be a really fantastic way to connect with them and to bring them aboard your life. And let's face it, many of us live with our families, but there's not a lot of interaction. So the beauty of it is that you start to bring them over and you say, so this is something that I'm actually looking forward to and that I cannot wait to share with you guys, or that I could use your support on this. So it's actually a very beautiful way to close your day. And that's it for me. Wait, I lost you guys.